Greetings everyone, I'm Mar. Once again, this is my opinion. As you can tell from the title up there, I am reviewing the 2020 video game adaptation, Sonic the Hedgehog. Before I get too far into it, just one reminder, if you want to support the channel, both the Patreon and PayPal links are down below. If you want to do a one-off support or a one-off request, you can go the PayPal route. If you want to continue to support the channel off and on, you can go the Patreon route. You'll gain access to videos early, and you'll be able to request each and every month. How many requests is going to depend on the tier. Now, Sonic the Hedgehog. It's a film directed by Jeff Fowler, and this is his directorial debut. Only other thing on his filmography is he worked in part of the animation department for Where the Wild Things Are. It's a screenplay by Josh Miller and Patrick Casey, who the only other big films that were on their filmography were stuff like Dorm Days 1 and 2 and some other weird films I'd never heard of. Kind of an interesting choice to have them write this, but I think they did a pretty good job with it. As you can tell from that, I did enjoy this film. Now, before I delve too far into it, I think I probably should set the scene. Like many of you that grew up in the 90s that did not really care about the brand loyalty to one system or were able to go back and forth, I played Sonic games. I played 1, 2, forget the name of it, but there was this weird one I had that I got when I got my Genesis. I forget what the name of it was. It was a weird one. I don't even know if I still have it or not, but it was the one that came with it, and I enjoyed playing it for what it was. I did rent 3 a couple times, which is how I came into contact with the character of Knuckles, who he doesn't come into this series until the sequel that was just released as of the time I'm recording this, so other than this, he won't be mentioned there. I never beat any of them, but I always liked playing them. 2 was always my favorite of the ones that I played, and because that was the one I had the longest, always played through it, got through all the levels. I forget the furthest I was able to get through the game, but I always enjoyed going through it, and it's been a few years since I played it, but maybe one day, pretty soon, I'll do a Let's Play of it for the gaming channel. And I did watch the shows from the 90s, both the one that was over the top and, of course, the darker one that was mainly on Saturday mornings. I enjoyed both of them. As I got older, I kind of went off to the side and stopped watching a lot of the Sonic stuff, so the later stuff involving the later characters like Rouge, Amy, whatever the cat's name was, I kind of fell off with that. I think the last thing Sonic-related I watched was the dub of that one OVA where Sonic has to fight his robot doppelganger. I remember enjoying that for what it was. And all the rest of the stuff. I know there's games later, like the one that came out in 2006 where he dates a human princess. I know people have mixed thoughts about that one, but I've never played it. And all the other ones like Sonic 4 and then the Generations. No really thoughts on those because I've never played any of them. It's just like with the later Pokemon games. After a while I kind of went off, and part of that is that I never really got the Nintendo systems because after Sega stopped making consoles with the Dreamcast, they started putting them on Nintendo and the other ones, and I just never got around to playing them. And the ones for the consoles I did have, I just never bought them. But it's, on the ever-growing list of games to play. Now, of course, I got my DS over there, and I got a Switch over there, so there's no really excuse for me to not play the more recent-ish ones that are for Nintendo, but I'll get to them eventually. Now, that set the tone. When I heard they were going to make a film based on Sonic the Hedgehog, I'm like, okay, if done right with the right creative people, this could be interesting. Because I've of the mindset that video game adaptations don't have to be bad, and I view them the same way you would view an adaptation of, say, a comic book. That it has to be similar and respectful to the source material, but if they make any changes, I'm fine with that. I mean, I'm fine with that with book adaptations too, but that one a little less so in certain regards. But if it's like a change to fit the change of medium from literary to screen, it works. Same thing here. Of course, it's also going to depend on the change. Sometimes you can make a big change, like a setting change, and it works. Case in point, Hitchcock changed the setting of Vertigo from Paris to San Francisco, and it works within the context of his film. Now here, they went the fish out of water route, which I know some people are going to be like, oh great, the fish out of water route again. When are we going to get an actual one set on the planet? Which I get it, but for the origin story, I don't mind it. I know people are going to go, well, fish out of water again. How many times are we going to do that? Depends on the character, depends on the setting. Like with Thor, it works, especially considering that he was banished in the first film. Depending on who you ask, it worked for He-Man, but I haven't seen that film, so I can't comment. And there's a handful of other times where it works. Here, it works, but it's not really fully fish out of water, because Sonic, as we find out, has been on Earth for years. It's just him not fully understanding what he's been watching. So it's a little bit of fish out of water, but only slight. Now, the plot of the film is that Sonic is pretty fast, and he has this weird power that flows through him. And as a kid, he's being trained by this owl, and they are attacked. So to save him, she sends him through this portal created by the rings, which, by the way, is a nice little way to get the power rings, which is a game mechanic, into the story by having them be able to teleport you from one place to another. She sends him to Earth and says, stay out of sight. Well, he gets here, and he does stay out of sight. You know, he watches the people. And he's seen occasionally by one person in the town he's staying in, which the name of the town, if I remember right, is Green Hills, which is a nice way to work in the name of one of the areas from the game, so I gotta applaud it there. You know, it's a conspiracy theory type guy that spots him. He's watching a couple people, but the main person he's watching is the character played by James Marsden, Tom, I'm probably gonna butcher his last name, Wachowski, and his wife, Maddie, played by Tika Sumpter, which they're a believable couple. I mean, there's only a handful of scenes with them in the movie. Most of them at the latter half of the film, but you believe them as a couple. And they are a mixed race couple, which is not really touched on in the film, other than the fact that her sister seems to hate him, and they never really give a reason why. She just hates him. So in the latter half of the film, I actually was hoping, like, I hope she actually gets blown up by one of these robots, because I hate this character. Which I don't know if she hates him because he's white or anything, but they just never touch on it, so it's up to the viewer to determine. It's just one of those things that, like, really, like when she spells out divorce, it's like, why do you even spend time with your sister anymore? Why? With attitude like that, you should go no contact, but that's just my opinion there. Anyway, Sonic watches them, and one day, he's playing baseball, as you see in the trailer, and he causes a power surge that causes a power outage with his power. Of course, that's noticed by the government, and they're deciding, well, we got to send people to figure out who it is, and they decide they're going to send one of their best people who happens to be very eccentric, and they don't like dealing with him, but because of how intelligent he is, they decide they're going to send him. And of course, that is Jim Carrey's Dr. Robotnik. And Jim Carrey, he's perfectly cast in this role. Now, in this film, he's less the Robotnik that we know and love to hate from the games and the cartoons, but you could tell he's a few steps there. He still has his sanity for the most part. He's eccentric. He speaks down to others, claiming he's more intelligent than them. And, of course, he builds all the robots, so that's nice. Start to see his drones. And Carrey just plays it perfectly, like the way he moves, the way he talks. I mean, we see it in the trailer, like, are you in charge? Yes, no, I'm in charge. And then, of course, the scene where he's dancing and then gets that weird coffee with the weird milk. I love the way you make them! And just the way he overreacts to everything. There's also a little bit of subtlety in certain scenes, but if you want Jim Carrey over the top and at his wackiest, this is the perfect casting choice here, and I love it. And, of course, he's on to Sonic at first. Now, the first scene where he's talking about Marsden's character is like, okay, I can get Marsden doing that, and then him trying to pull the whole government thing when he finds the quill. It's like, I was like waiting for him to go like, you could have just told him I found that outside. It's like, does that have something to do with the surge? And go with that, but it seemed like Robotnik was going to try to eliminate him at that point, and it's like, okay, you could try to do that, mister, I can use the government however I want, but it's like, you know, people are going to notice when you kill off the sheriff. You're going to have to kill off a whole town, and that's going to be noticed. I mean, it's only a few hundred people, but that will be noticed, even if it's only by the people that live in that state. You're going to have to start eliminating a lot of people there, but it never gets to that point. Because that's when Sonic reveals himself, as we see in the trailer, and Carrey has that overreaction, like, ah, when he sees the source of the power. And the rest of the film is them trying to get Sonic from the town to San Francisco, because in the course of trying to deal with Robotnik, trying to hide away, Sonic accidentally drops his bag of power rings through one that he was going to use to take to the Mushroom Planet, but instead he causes it to send to San Francisco, and it goes and lands on top of one of the buildings. So they have to go from point A to point B, all the while trying to get away from Robotnik and his drones, which leads to an excellent car chase scene one of the scenes where we see Sonic actually do his little famous roll from the games into one of the robots, and we just see how relentless Robotnik's designs are. Whereas, like, it's a big one, and every time it gets destroyed, a little smaller one comes out until he gets to one that's about the same size as this Charger, give or take. It's about the same size as Dr. Giro's spy robot, which I thought was pretty cool. And it has an explosive in there that sticks to you, which I just love that. Like, how are they going to get rid of this one? And it's also kind of cool that in their little dealings that Robotnik is christened Eggman by Sonic. A nice little wink and nod to the comics there. Now, as you can guess, in the end, they do defeat Robotnik, and he is sent to another planet, and this is where Robotnik starts to take on his classic appearance. Carrie shaves his head, and he has his stash out. And even a little bit in this scene, he starts to channel a little bit of animated and video game Robotnik with his voice, with his reconnaissance quip. And, of course, from what we've seen of the trailer of the second one, he is going to keep some of that look, so that's going to be good. And also, Carrie's still going to be over the top. It's nice to see Carrey reprising a role he actually does enjoy playing. Would have been nice to see him reprise a certain count, but alas, that never happened. As I mentioned, Fowler directed and Miller and Casey wrote the film. Fowler does a pretty good job for a first-time director. He gets competent shots, the performances fit the tone and style of the film. And I'd like to see what else he's going to do after he's done with the Sonic films, because, you know, he's probably going to do another one after this, unless the money and creative isn't right. Because you know what they always say, it's always cash and creative. Miller and Casey, they did a pretty good job writing the screenplay. You know, the humor's there. There's a couple moments where I'm like, really? They had Sonic say that? But I guess considering he's not fully socialized at this point, despite the fact he's not a kid, it makes sense, especially since some of it comes from his love of chili dogs. I do wonder if they wrote the sequel, because I didn't manage to look up if they did or not, but I could see why if they did, I could see why they would keep them on. I mean, keep the team that works. The cinematography was by Stephen F. Winden, and that's part of the reason why the film looks as great as it does, especially with Fowler being a first-time director, because he's experienced. Here's some of the films he's done the cinematography for. The Postman, and that's the one with Kevin Costner. I mean, I haven't seen the film yet, but just from the few snippets I've seen, the film, it does at least look good. Deep Blue Sea, a film I do have a review up on the channel for if you want to hear my thoughts on it. Excellent B-movie made on a higher budget. And then, of course, he also did the cinematography for several of the Fast and Furious films. 5, 6, 7, 9 are the ones I wrote down. The score was by Tom Holkenborg, known by his musical name of Junkie XL, so you know what type of score you're in for when you hear that. And he does a pretty good job. It fits the tone of it. And I do like how near the end he works in a piano, like a very slow pace, low tone, low key, nice and relaxing cover of the Sonic theme from the games, which is a nice little nod. When I heard them, I'm like, oh, that's nice. That's nice. I hope we get more of that in the sequel when it comes to the score. Out of cast, I mentioned the main cast already. The supporting cast is good as well. I didn't write the rest of them down, but they're well cast in their roles. And then Ben Schwartz voices Sonic the Hedgehog. He does a pretty good job. It's similar to the past voices that I can remember, but different enough to where you can tell he's not trying to fully mimic them. Because Jamel White is the one that voiced him was the voice of Sonic in my childhood, so trying to copy that voice and be like, yeah, right. And at least, of course, if you don't know who Jamel White is, you might recognize his other famous character. Did I do that? If you don't know, you're too young. Of course, he's also voiced some other famous characters that also were part of my childhood in their recent reimaginings. He was the voice of Dewey in the DuckTales reboot, which I haven't watched all the episodes for, but I've seen snippets, and I do like the voice of Huey, Dewey, and Louie in that show. And he's the voice of Leonardo in the Rise of the TMNT cartoon, which I have not seen all the way through, but that's definitely a love it or hate it show just from the snippets I've seen. They are doing a movie that's supposed to come out this year, so he's going to be reprising his role there. Just from what I've heard, he definitely fits Leonardo in the tone of that show, so it's nice to see he is getting voice work. He seems to go back and forth between being a film actor and a voice work actor, but he seems to be getting more work, or at least more steady work as a voice one. But you got to be careful there, because sometimes you might get underpaid, but that seems to be more for anime dubbing. Now, the film was made on a budget of $85 to $90 million, so For a blockbuster with a lot of special effects like this film has, that's like a moderately sized one. And it made $319 million. So, whatever way you look at it, whether by Hollywood accounting or just looking at the numbers straight up, it did make money. Of course, obviously, if you look at the numbers straight up, it made about 3 times its budget. Now, of course, we don't know if that budget accounts for marketing, but who knows? I don't think they usually factor that in there. I think that's why they go by the double to break even. Now, with the breaking even would have been about 180 million, so it definitely made a profit there. And there's also the fact that that might just be theatrical gross, so it made more on video rental and all that. So there's always that, and it does have a sequel, which right now, as I look, the sequel has already made over 200 million, and its budget was about the same, maybe just a little bit more for the added special effects. Which, to go in, some of that budget is a little bit more because of the fact they went back and changed Sonic's design. I know a lot of you are probably wondering, well, he hasn't commented on Sonic's design yet. Well, yes. Now, I was in the camp of, when I saw the design, I'm like, okay, it's different. It looks a little bit more realistic. I'll see how it plays. And then when everybody backlashed, I'm like, okay, they're entitled to it, but we'll just see how it plays. But then they went and actually changed the design. It's an example of a studio hearing the backlash and deciding to act on it. So they went back and changed it, and that upped the budget a little bit. Now, there's always the distinct possibility that they already had the stylized, more game-accurate version on standby, and they just used that money to just implement it into the scenes, and that they went with that original look just to get people talking about the film. And if that's the case, I know this is just me speculating on that, but if that's the case, that would explain a lot. Free publicity there, especially considering that comic book films do have that stigma about them that, like, oh, they all suck. Well, if you think about the ones we got in the 90s, you could kind of see why. I mean, Double Dragon, need I say more? I mean, Street Fighter, so bad it's good that I enjoy it. This money's not worth the paper it's printed on. Super Mario Brothers, I think, is much maligned due to the fact that of the stories in the games we had at that point. It does adapt the base story, just giving it its own flair. The Resident Evil films, the live-action ones, the first 2 were good. Started to go downhill after that. King of Fighters haven't seen. Tekken haven't seen. Both Mortal Kombats, the original and this reboot, I think are pretty good for different reasons. Like the 95 one better, obviously. And then, of course, MKA, that one, along with Double Dragon, need I say more? The thing is, that those ones are both meme machines. It is glorious! Need I say more? And then all the other ones. I know with Assassin's Creed, it depends on who you ask. Like, I know one of my supervisors at work liked it, and I don't think he's that familiar with the game, so he went into it blind. I haven't seen it yet, but I have played a couple of the games, so we'll see how I like that when I eventually get around to it. I'll probably do a video game adaptation-thon one of these days. But we'll see. I mean, you guys all know my thoughts on the Resident Evil ones, even though I haven't updated and uploaded that part of the big old Resident Evil video essay I did years ago. But we'll just see how those age when I actually get around to watching them. Overall, Sonic the Hedgehog is a pretty fun film. It's a great video game adaptation. Shows that if you get the right creative team, director, writers, cinematographer behind it, you can make an excellent film. You got to have a right cast that you can get the right performance out of. And of course, with Marsden, it's like, really, you're having another furry sidekick? Can't you get away from the furry sidekicks, Marsden? And of course, perfect voice for Sonic. And with the fact that we are getting a sequel, which the mid-credit scene for this film hinted at when we saw Tails, of course, voiced by his video game and recent anime voice actress, should be good. And of course, we've got Knuckles in the sequel, voiced by Idris Elba. Perfect casting choice there. I mean, just look at the trailer. Does it look like I need your power? That's going to be good. I know a lot of people are liking that change with him better than the... Oh, wait, I can't read. Even though I think that is a funny joke. But I can't wait to see the sequel one, and I do hope at least we get a third one down the pipe. Of course, that will be into the games that I'm not familiar with, but if they could sell me on them in the film, I don't really need that prior knowledge. But let's just see what's the story of the future of this series has in store. Hopefully, it paves the way for better video game adaptations in the future. Till next time, guys.